Project Lawful aka Planecrash by Arwayne aka Eliezer Yudkowsky and Lintamande.
The story's now clearly designated villain heads over to room 3, walking at a normal pace. He knocks on Sarsini's door.
She opens it.
He steps inside and closes the door. Carissa Sevar does not like the thought of me taking possibly any risks of destroying the universe, and I told her that it was looking like my best alternative to negotiated agreement was turning her into a statue for a week, and she had a panic attack, and I thought she was over that. She told me before she was over the statue thing, and the story is making me a villain, and I do not want to be a villain, and I do not like being a villain. Especially to her, this was not how I wanted to finally be the villain to her, and force her to do something for real, the way she wanted to be forced for real, and our relationship is over. I need a hug.
She hugs him. She's taller than him, with a build that's not entirely human. She says she's half something, but what the something is changes every time. I'm just absolutely bursting with advice, but possibly this is not the time.
I think this is, in fact, a pretty good time to be reminded of things my people would think were common sense. I suspect it's a time.
Okay, number 1, she's Chelish. If she ever said she doesn't have trauma, she was lying. That's on her, not on you, but so far as knowing what to expect goes, yeah, she has trauma, she's fucking built out of it. Cheliax is awful, yeah? That's why we have to end it. Number 2, like 60% of relationship problems are, we had that conversation and got wildly different things out of it. So maybe have someone have her write down what she thinks her major takeaways were, just so you can compare and marvel at the mortal condition. I don't know how anyone reads their own past notes, or 2 different records of the same conversation, and doesn't want to dissolve the whole universe in a vat of acid. Number 3, you also have trauma, dumbass. From her specifically lying to you and manipulating you. From her trying to get you to hurt her.
None of that hurt at the time. All the trauma was at the end, and therefore I am not hurt, which is completely logical, right? Yes. I realize none of that made any sense, however. What you don't realize is, that's not the issue. The issue is that Carissa is completely unreasonable about ending the universe.
Everyone's completely unreasonable about ending the universe. That's the other 40% of relationship problems that aren't miscommunications.
Is there a reason you're not just telling me that I'm valid, which was sort of why I was here? A reason such as, for example, my not being valid?
Honey, I have no fucking idea what happened from your description. You told her you were going to statue her. She had a panic attack? Sounds to me like you're valid, and also she's valid, kinda. Probably if you tell people that you're going to statue them, then solidly 80% of the time, they'll have a panic attack. You know, I think you're, if anything, trying too hard at avoiding destroying the universe, and that she's batshit insane about that.
Everyone in civilization would try pretty hard to fix any universe, even this one, rather than destroying it. They'd just have the maturity to accept destroying a universe if they had to, if the universe was one where a third of souls hurt forever or die if they're lucky, and Carissa Sevar is an alien whose views are sort of internally consistent, at least. But I don't understand why everybody who isn't Carissa Sevar is this reality is like an insane parody of arguments against negative utilitarianism, is what it is. It's a giant straw reality, because nobody who argues against negative utilitarianism would say that you shouldn't even destroy Pharasma's creation, and people here are in some kind of bizarre state of not thinking about hell because they grew up with hell always being there, and it's like this whole insanity is trying to crush in on me, like the evil planes weigh on your spirit if you go there without protection, and I need you to say the simple, sane things first and put the complicated relationship advice later.
There are billions of people in hell and they're suffering horribly and pointlessly. You couldn't ask them, hey, want me to destroy the universe? Because they'd assume it was some cruel trick that was going to hurt them worse. Every day, more people are born who'll end up in hell. No one has a plan that will solve this anytime soon. Even outside hell, most people have awful, coerced, painful lives where they're scared and suffering practically the entire time. Having kids in this world is horribly immoral. People only do it because they don't have a choice, or have never thought in their life about whether anyone should exist, or are making sure not to think about the evil afterlives.
Okay, See, that still isn't what I was looking for, because the people outside of evil afterlives, if you ask them, will say not to kill them, whereas the people in hell say to please kill them. I literally heard somebody say it when I cast Vision of Hell. And how am I the only one who thinks that yes, you destroy the multiverse, because the people in hell explicitly want that very intensely, and there are lots of them. However, I have at least now heard both sides being crazy, instead of only one side being crazy. So I still feel very alone, but not like some kind of massive social group hallucination is trying to choke me with its ghostly bare hands. You may proceed to relationship advice.
Assign someone who is not you to keeping the chick out of trouble and punishing her if she acts up.
That's terrible advice. The chick has an artifact headband more powerful than mine, and is very likely now this story's protagonist, and if I try to casually leave her to my minions, it will not end well.
Okay, point taken. But the thing you're doing is incredibly, incredibly doomed. You and her have a history where you hurt her 'cause it's hot. Now you broke it off, and you're doing the exact same thing except it's for real, and both of you fall apart when it turns out that in real life, hurting people hurts them.
Cool. My story has given me a deadline of basically a couple of weeks modulo time dilation, by the end of which I need to either finish up the main plot, turn Igorian into ash, or watch Cheliax attack Osirion, and I am guessing it's supposed to be finish the main plot. Carissa has wishes. I need to be more intelligent now, and the headband I need to be more intelligent now, and what she wants to do instead is become INT-29 herself right away, which, as much as it is extremely Carissa, is not, I think, going to help, because in fact there are not ways to save the world, and especially not quickly, that don't involve being willing to destroy the multiverse if necessary, and Carissa has an extreme non-nuanced position on not destroying the multiverse, where she can't point to a particular quantitative balance of people in bad afterlives versus people not in bad afterlives, and instead is just nope, nope, nope. Why is the protagonist allowed to be like this? It's supposed to be the villain who has the non-nuanced position, where they start out thinking there's no point in even talking to you about it. I digress. What exactly am I supposed to do instead of hurting her?
Well, I'm not convinced about all this is a story stuff, and I kind of figure that if this is a story, then it will in fact end, and everyone will stop existing regardless. So we should only worry about not being in a story. But in a story, you are definitely supposed to talk to her and figure out the stupid miscommunication that is 60% of the problem. In not a story, well, you can still talk to her. That sometimes works in real life, and if it doesn't, you can either decide you're not going to force her to give you the wishes and headband, or that you are going to force her to give you the wishes and headband, whatever that requires doing to her. But you can only decide that if there's something you are capable of doing that makes her give you the wishes and headband. Yeah? And you gotta have it in mind before you start down that road.
Dominate person would be the obvious thing to try for the headband. I could never go back to being a cleric of Abadar afterwards, but it'd be the obvious thing to try if I wanted to just take her stuff. There is, I think, basically no amount of pain you can apply to Carissa that will make her hand wishes to you. She would, if she isn't Alani enough to be beyond threats now, yield them if you threaten to otherwise plane shift her to Abaddon, and I will plane shift myself to Abaddon before I threaten her with that.
Not that I don't relate to the impulse to plane shift to Abaddon now and then, but I do not really recommend it here. So it sounds like you don't actually have a good way to get her stuff by force, so you gotta try the talk to her thing. You're talking like when you wear your personality headband, but you're not wearing it. Should you put it on?
Oh, that's funny. So the key to still having a personality at INT-24 is having my ex-girlfriend annoy me enough that my emotions come back. It would be more of a solution to anything if I wanted to have emotions while needing to. On every single plan I've come up with so far, destroy at least one city, which, you are really supposed to leave to the keepers, or at least the law-abiding sociopaths, and not try to do while being a normal person with a normal personality.
Well, you could destroy the cities, and then have the ex-girlfriend annoy you back into having a personality instead of doing it in the other order.
I suspect she has some actual story purpose here, which is not that, what with being the protagonist and all. Carissa already, I'm pretty sure inadvertently, talked me into giving up on all my tries at finding complicated alternatives and just releasing Rovagug myself, because otherwise Asmodeus may release it anyways. I suppose that makes you happy.
Well, I mean, depends whether he eats the world or not, but I gotta say, it's definitely a move in the right direction.
Out of context, given that we're on track to release Rovagug, I'm pretty sure it won't succeed at destroying Pharasma's creation. Maybe Galarian, or at worst Galarian's material plane, but definitely not the whole multiverse, which I would ordinarily be trying very hard not to think about. But, since it's you and your preference ordering is flipped at that end of things, I want to make sure you are still fundamentally okay with our agreement, and your oath to me, and you getting isekai'd to wherever, if the result of all that work is just the multiverse being fixed up a bit, and not Rovagug eating everything.
Does being fixed up a bit mean people have an easier time getting out if they wanna, and no more hell?
If there's people spending years begging to permati, and not being able to, or people stuck in the material being unhappy because they can't just kill themselves and get an acceptable deal on an afterlife afterwards, then yes, this would represent a failure of my plans, or a very deep error on my own part, about what my utility function is. I think we're pretty aligned at what obviously constitutes an incredibly bad outcome, just you don't exactly have a lot of training quantifying your desires, so I am checking that what you think is a somewhat worse than nothingness outcome, and I think is a fairly okay outcome, is acceptable to you. If we get that instead of this, and maybe Rovagug not being so much of a possibility after that either.
Well, good enough, I'm not gonna call it quits.
I'm really mad at him.
I'm getting that sense.
He said, "You own yourself." Why did he say that? If he thinks I should give him everything of mine he happens to want and threatens to statue me the first time I don't go where I'm told.
Well, the obvious guess is that he wants you to own yourself and also wants you to help him and not be his enemy, and was hoping he wouldn't have to pick one or the other.
He doesn't have to pick one or the other. I came here to work with him. I could have just told Rugaton, told Audlemans. Apparently even Iomade didn't know, and I could have told her. That part I didn't know. I figured she knew and was just okay with it because good thinks it's fine to destroy people if they're devils and don't really count. That's a digression. I didn't do that. I figured I owed it to Keltham, who I thought was an honorable person trying his best, to not have him annihilated, to not let Asmodeus being willing to destroy the world be an automatic win condition for Asmodeus. I figured that the world, the way it is, can't last forever anyway if we can't fix hell. I thought about it, and it was the most terrifying decision of my life, and I decided to try to help Keltham do something better. And I came here and said, I have an apology gift for Keltham. I want to help him not have to destroy the world. And he goes, I'm not Keltham. Don't give me anything except in your own interests. And obviously it's in my own bloody interests to have banished myself from his fucking demiplane and gated to hell. But this is my fault, and I'm trying to fix it, and I'm trying to... If there are gods trying to thread this needle, trying to make sure that between the possibilities, this gets crushed and everything stays the same, and everything gets annihilated, I want to be something they can use. I want to be a tool it's possible to employ to find that space, not just something that drags as sharply as possible in one direction or the other. I think probably more worlds get saved if there's someone who is trying to figure out how we actually win here, and no one else is fucking stepping up.
Have you told him that?
No, because he wouldn't even admit to me what his plans were or give me any fucking time to rederive it himself. He said he was going to give me time to think, but then instead he threatened to statue me before I'd had it.
So?
What?
You have something it might be valuable for him to know. He doesn't know it. But you could tell him it, and then he'd know it. Why do I care? Why do you care how things got this way? What are you trying to get out of deciding it's his fault he doesn't know it yet?
I can't trust him to only say things he means in anything resembling the way I mean them, or to give me any space to figure out things I can use to help him, or to appreciate anything I'm doing to try to be someone he can trust, or to not randomly decide to execute me, or to not randomly decide that dealing with me is too emotionally difficult and not worth reducing the probability of accidentally destroying the world. It means that he's internalized none of the stakes, and I'm the only person I can trust to be acting like the stakes are real.
It seems like all that makes it more important for him to know what you're thinking.
I don't want to talk to him anymore. If I say the wrong thing, I'll wake up and he'll have Glasdegorian and is in the middle of unleashing Rovagug and annihilating billions and billions of people, and he'll think I'm stupid and unreasonable for being horrified, and I can't... Come up with words, come up with thoughts, knowing any second might be the last chance anyone in the world has before he murders us all for being uglier than Dath Ilan.
Sometimes the best thing to do probably won't work. The Chakti core skill of working in this world where Asmodeus is a power, where the world wound is a thing, is doing the best thing, even though it probably won't work, and definitely won't leave the world in an acceptable state afterwards. Just figuring out something that could matter, that you can actually do, and doing it, even if you're still almost definitely going to fail. I don't actually know that you need to master this skill, though, because it sounds to me like you have 5 wishes that he wants. And if you can't buy the stuff you need to have a functional working relationship with your ex from him for 5 wishes, then this magic item price deflation is really getting out of control.
Is this a good speak for you're being pathetic?
Mostly you're being pathetic isn't something I find myself ever wanting to communicate. But you have the resource to accomplish your goals and are directing your energy at figuring out why it didn't happen to you already comes up a fair bit.
I think that's just being pathetic. Or, well, a flavor of it.
It makes sense that you would have a complicated relationship with Asmodeanism, but from my perspective, there's no baby in that bathwater, and you should just toss it all.
They're completely fucking off script.
I find it literally impossible for myself to mourn this fact. What with being a chaotic good goddess of revolution, I'm surprised you are capable of it. Nethys did warn us that the divergences would amplify the further we got into the playthrough.
Milani, as much as I'd ordinarily celebrate mortals saying fuck you to the complicated machinations of destiny, which a bunch of meddling gods had wrought around them, it seems like not the best time. Have you never memorized a script and acted in a play, where other actors relied on you to follow your lines? Never listened to instructions from a swordmaster showing you exactly how to guide your weapon?
No. Very few of my instructors were competent, and none of those very few ever asked me to exactly imitate instructions I didn't understand. Carissa Savar has ravelled more of the situation around herself, earlier than expected. Keltham is pulling himself together faster. We have carefully played through all of the flag events in Nethys's walkthrough, hit nearly all of them, and now Carissa and Keltham are both doing better than in the possibilities Nethys has seen before, which is why they are, from our perspective, going off script.
Well, yes, that's very wonderful. Except for the part where, at this point, I'm not seeing how Keltham gets the wishes and the headband from Carissa, in a way that obeys the decision-theoretic constraints, if Keltham has already refused to allow Carissa to make the mistake of trying to repay him for the hurt she considered herself to have dealt him, and Carissa has already figured out that Keltham is targeting Pharasma rather than Asmodeus.
Yes, they're off the script, off the trodden roads and making their own path through the untracked wilderness.
Milani, we have other concerns than how many chaotic goodness points we are scoring here.
Caden, it's not that I can't see your point. It's that I can't actually value things the way you're valuing them. Which, yes, is why you and not I were put on point for a lot of these interventions.
I suppose you're going to tell me that we may, at this rate, finally be on track for Nethys's hypothesized good ending.
Of course not. There's far too many plot points we're obviously not hitting. Asmodea is in the gardens, and we don't even know how Broom was supposed to be relevant. Caden, I'm not saying we're not in enormous trouble here. It's just a kind of trouble that I can't help but approve of.
Why is my life like this?
We wouldn't necessarily see it ourselves, if they were going to solve matters for themselves by virtue of being lawful. And they are in fact both relatively lawful for mortals. So now we watch, and hope for the best out of the chaos that inevitably results when mortals try to be lawful at each other.
There's a difference between getting drunk and breaking some rules, and getting so drunk that you stop thinking it's a good idea to follow the well-trodden forest path back home while you're in that state.
If you say so, Caden. As for myself, once I was clearly not on the path anymore, I think I'd enjoy seeing a bit of the forest, so long as I was there.
Fair enough, Milani. I'll try to enjoy it despite the terror.
When Keltham comes out of Sarsini's room, Carissa will be sitting on the floor, making a headband as stress relief.
Dath Keltham, Intelligence 22, Wisdom 16, Charisma 18, Iarwain. The man who emerges from Sarsini's room has changed to a +4+0+4 headband and is not currently under Owl's wisdom. He hears out a quick report from Tarnish, who has a nearly halfling-like ability to lean against a wall and promptly have everyone else in the room forget she exists. He continues on to Carissa, the casual headband maker. Redul wants to talk spellcraft with you at some point, he says to her on seeing this. He is, on his view of himself, one of those eighth circles who properly perfects their spellcraft, instead of just having absorbed a lot of magic by being in a lot of fights. Of course, Redul would immediately terminate his employment, and possibly break his oath and try to kill me if you told him you believed I was going to destroy the world, which gets us back to the problem where I got excited and didn't have you make any promises before you got here.
I have figured out the conditions I need to be willing to work here, if you want to talk about that now.
Sure, let's negotiate. It's seeming to me like there's a good chance that I've already shattered what I was supposed to do here, which was just not warn you, and accept the wishes and headband as your apology, because there were so many things so vastly more important than how I'd have felt about that. And at minimum, I'm going to lose Igorian now. What conditions?
1. We're not trading like Asmodeans. The way Asmodeans trade is stupid. The way Asmodeans trade with their prisoners is to hurt them, or threaten them, or use modify memory to erase all our interactions up to this point, and try again and again until you get me to give up the wishes and headband. The way Asmodean prisoners trade is to, as I said earlier, at the first opportunity, open my gate to hell and report everything about this situation to Despater and destroy you. I didn't do my end of that. I'll explain why in a second. You're not going to do your end of that. We will trade with each other like mortals with different goals who are being mortal and hating each other and being in a ton of pain, very likely to end up assuming our goals are more different than they actually are, and who are actively correcting for that by trying really hard to mind the interests of the other and pass up on chances to destroy each other to our benefit, even though they're wildly more appealing than continuing to try. I don't know if there's a god of that. I do think if that's not what we're aiming at, then we're completely fucked. 2. You want to destroy the universe if you can't get it remade to your satisfaction. I obviously think that's incredibly horrible of you. I distrust everything I learned from you and from Dathilan because I feel very fundamentally that if this is the product of those values, then I don't want them inside me and don't want them shaping me. But I didn't. When I first realized that was what you wanted, report you and get you squished. I sold my soul to protect the project girls and come here with 30 wishes. I tried for 30 wishes and 2 headbands. I understand my reasons now. There's maybe 100 billion people, so I should be willing to risk a 1 in 100 billion chance of destroying the universe for anything for which I'd be willing to go to Axis. Grab a person out of the incredible, joyous, brilliant, meaningful life they've spent the last 10,000 years building and feed them to demons while they begged me for mercy. It would take a lot to get me to do that, but I'd do it to fix hell. Don't ask me how many people I'd grab from Axis and feed to demons to fix hell. I don't know, but it's not many, not anywhere near enough to close the gap between us. But I'm not trying to close the gap between us. I'm not trying to ally with you. I am trying to use you to fix hell and fix Abaddon and fix the current state of affairs where Asmodeus and maybe other gods are holding in reserve an option to destroy the world. I think, feeding some people to demons in expectation when I use you for that. I hate that. I hate you for being someone I can only use by feeding people to demons, but I don't have the option of using someone else. Also, I'm really scared at this point that even if they squish you, the universe doesn't have another 1,000 years in it, in a configuration this unstable. We've got to fix it into something that no one has the power to destroy and that very few value systems that are floating around all over the place would want to destroy. We've got to build our own civilization. And there are people praying to me. I think if there were 2 universes, and in one of them I fed them to demons by accident, trying to answer their prayers, and in the other one they came to me in hell and were safe and found mercy, and I told them that the price of that mercy was that in the other universe I'd fed them to demons, trying my best, I think a lot of them would forgive me. I think a lot of them would be glad. If there were 10 universes, the numbers don't cohere yet. Probably the numbers will cohere when I'm smarter. But that's where I'm at. That's why I haven't killed myself or banished myself or gated out or done ascending to Redul, because when my numbers don't cohere and when I don't get another chance and I have to just go with my best guess about what I can do here and I lose options every minute, I think I'm supposed to try to fix things, not to try to kick the can down the road until someone who agrees with you succeeds. And I'm willing to commit to that. I'm willing to promise you that I'll stay here trying to use you to fix the world instead of trying to warn someone you're going to crush it. But I want you to promise me that you'll let me do that I'll have the freedom and autonomy to pursue the ideas I come up with for alternatives to destroying the world, that I'll be able to do whatever makes sense for ensuring Asmodeus would rather live in the world we're demanding than destroy it, and Pharasma would rather live in the world we're demanding than destroy it, and that I'll be allowed to make myself smarter, and that I'll be allowed to potentially compact with Dispater, and potentially compact with Cheliax, and potentially call in Pilar and do the other things I might need to do. 3. If you don't own me, you don't give me orders. 4. If you don't own me, you don't take my stuff. 5. If the universe might have a lifespan measured in weeks, I will spend exactly 0 seconds of them as a statue. 6. And this one Carmen thought was stupid. She was helping me work these out and explain them and make sure they covered what I actually needed. She thinks that it's not really reasonable for me to ask for this, but I think you're Keltham, and I want to call you Keltham, and not get told you're not Keltham. And I think I do have obligations to you because I hurt you, and I can try to fulfill those obligations to you by solving as many as I can of the problems I caused and getting you the things you need to be okay. And not betraying you even though I have at various points been really tempted, and you don't have to agree with me about any of that, but don't tell me not to see it that way.
We are in a situation that is decision theoretically complicated. That's the part you're not seeing. Carissa, I was raised to understand things that are, from a Galarian perspective, insane and twisty and complicated and stupid and turning on arcane points of math, and from a Dathilani perspective, twisty in a simple, funny way, like a not professional story that an average person wrote for fun and their friends to read, a story where all of the points are obvious in retrospect as soon as you actually think of them. And then, if you're a Dathilani character in that story, you have to try very hard not to think about those points, because the information has negative value to you in a way that threatens to destroy all possibility of an ending better than destroying the multiverse. We can't be equal partners in this, and the reason for that isn't that you don't know decision theory. You have the capability to reach INT 29 from where you stand, and then you would understand the ass out of the decision theory. You would see the whole thing immediately, maybe without even my explaining it, from that level, and once you saw it, you would be forced, by being the sort of entity you are, down a path that, this isn't the actual problem, but an analogy, would be if you were a sort of entity that responded to threats, and so as soon as you started having any power, here, Asmodeus would laugh and command you to go do as he said, or he'd destroy every paving stone in hell to spite you, along with Abigail and Pilar, and every soul that ever prayed to you. Except I cannot even tell you for certain that it is like that I am trying in a way to protect you from yourself, because you are an alien and maybe the way you think it's actually valid that Keltham is something you should just turn in to Asmodeus to be squashed. So I am trying to thread a very narrow needle, a narrow storyline that I wish I hadn't seen, and that I'm worried I've now ruined by telling you, when we met, that I no longer considered myself to be Keltham, nor wanted to be him again, because it's too painful to destroy a city when you have feelings about that. Carissa, I need those wishes and the headband, and once I have those things, I think, I'll be back on track. And there are things that I can honestly trade to you for those, and things I cannot honestly trade to you for those. I can trade making sure that in a week of real time, you get wished up on all 6 stats yourself, and giving you all the headbands and enhancement spells I won't need. I can trade you telling you the real story, as soon as I do have the headband and wishes, and offering you the access to try to do harm reduction on what you see as the harm from my plans. I can trade you that you never have to take my orders to do anything positive, just promise not to do a lot of things. But the one thing I cannot do is give you anything like the power to call a halt, shut things down, or try to fix the multiverse on your own authority, because we are in a situation where, from my perspective, possibly even from yours, though I don't know, you are the wrong shape of entity.
This isn't a demand, but if you shut up about Dathilan, it'll require less self-control from me to talk to you like a civilized person. I think try to do harm reduction on the harm from your plans is the thing I'm asking for. I just want really broad latitude to do it. Not just talking to you if it reduces the harm from your plans to me to go close the world wound or compact with Dispater or return to Cheliax, then I want it agreed I'll get to do that. But I'm not asking for anything that doesn't fall under that. If you can give me that, then we're set.
You cannot give anything to me in order to protect yourself from yourself, or we are back in the land of metaphorical Asmodeus, annihilating every paving stone in hell, just to spite you personally. We should assume, for these purposes, that we are actually on different sides, and you are not with Iomede's side in this, let alone mine, as may very well be the case. Given that, why would you make that compact? Or, what is the compact? I don't understand.
Speaking loosely and not committing specifically to these phrasings, you give me a couple hundred of your fucking wish diamonds and tell me all of your plans, immediately and clearly and in detail with no more fucking around or being deliberately misleading, so that I can figure out how to do harm reduction. I give you these 15 wishes, and we can time-share the crown, and I swear not to try to oppose you, or recruit people who will, or blah blah blah. I forfeit the ability to steer this by trying to get you deleted from reality instead of by trying to have you implement the best possible version of your plan in the most receptive possible world. I explained why I'm making this compact. It's because my alternative is trying to recruit some force to squish you, and I don't actually believe that squishing you produces a world that lasts the next 1,000,000 years, let alone forever. Also, I think you're a wreck and not thinking very clearly and might benefit even by your own lights from an additional pair of eyes on your plans. And maybe this actually isn't what you want to do, and if it's not, I want to be in a position to notice. So, between trying to squish you and trying to reduce the harm done by your destroy the multiverse plans, I'm picking the latter. I know we're not on the same side, but I was never on the same side as Asmodeus, and I served him for 25 years. I am pretty well prepared to do harm reduction for alien forces fundamentally opposed to mortal flourishing.
He leans back against the wall and puts his hands over his eyes. You are kind, he says.
Thanks. Got it from you. Do we have the outlines of a deal?
We do. I propose that we go time-dilated. If the portal is up, now, or plane shift if it's not, you promise not to banish yourself or kill yourself or do anything to torpedo my plans while we do that. Interpreted, kindly. And then we work out terms, and possibly we should use your wishes immediately, depending on what kind of deadline you think we're on, about hell getting word that you left. And to be clear, I would not be putting on your headband immediately after that. I'd be trying gentler boosts first, and that time making sure I had maxed splendor while I did that.
I swear I won't banish myself or kill myself or torpedo your plans for the next subjective hour while we work out details. Time dilation and wish use immediately sounds good. I take it I need to move fast to find a way for you to not destroy Cheliax, and I'm rather fond of the place.
I think just Igorian on the default trajectory if there's no deal, but that unleashes a lot of chaos onto the world, just like a Chelish invasion of Assyrion would.
I think there's an opening here for me to assassinate Abigail, raise her, and then immediately present her with a contract in which she agrees not to invade Osirian, but details might depend on the rest of your plan. How best to handle Cheliax depends a lot on what we're angling for in the final negotiations. That scaffold board you were making, is that meant to be an assistive device for casting from specific scrolls like my series of boosts to headband making is for spellcraft?
No, it's meant to be a structure with a visible substructure that behaves isomorphically to magical physics, including the parts of magic that aren't usually visible, for purposes of pinning down magical physics, doing de novo spell design, and, ideally, it will help with wish phrasings. To be clear, that is not particularly close to working yet.
That is so cool that it's an immense tragedy. You're trying to use it for something horrible, and I will not help you with it at all.
Tarnish taps her lips, having been told to shut up some time ago.
I'll try out allowing you to speak once.
He was much less of a wreck and thinking much more clearly when he wasn't around you, she says to Carissa. I think that what Keltham's actually trying to do is more aesthetic, but I'd consider it both beautiful and deserved if you distracted him enough with your constant sniping, which he permitted, that he accidentally destroyed the multiverse.
She'll just ignore the person who she's been specifically told is trying to hurt her. The way Cheliax is going to learn I betrayed them is by raising Hadrian and Abarco, but that's a true res right now, and they may instead have gone to hell to question the devils. I went to the one fortress in Avernus I know of, and the Most High knows exactly which it is. If that's so, they know already that I ambiguously betrayed them, though I don't know how rapidly that'll be conveyed in hell, nor do I know how much doubt they'll be in. With glibness up, I can maybe bluff a pit fiend about who I'm working for, even if they've heard otherwise. Or we can depart if they seem suspicious, and that tips the calculus about whether it's worth it.
Wow, you can bluff a pit fiend with glibness up? That makes an entire one person in this conversation who could bluff a pit fiend with glibness up. I expect I will put glibness up and use it to try to be completely quiet and expressionless throughout the whole thing. But we're wasting dilated time. Let's head out of the Forbiddance and get this done.
Then she'll follow him out of the Forbiddance and take his hand for the plane shift.
The Grand High Priestess will at some point interrupt their negotiations within the rope trick to say that the portal is up. They need to take down that rope trick and put up another one right by the portal, so Tira can cast a forbiddance covering the demiplane except the portal, after which Tira can finally head back to Kalesh.
Carissa is actually deeply curious about Sarenrae now, but it seems like not the time, and also like Keltham's minions might be something of a hostile crowd. She has no idea why. She's the one who is trying to prevent everyone being murdered, of the people in this room.
The portal is finally up. Everybody wants to go see the temporary demiplane, even if they're not in a time-dilated rush. Some unusual-looking people will soon become visible wandering around outside the rope trick.
Carissa Sivar is paying a very tiny bit of attention to things outside her negotiation with Keltham, monitoring for threats, because she was at the World Wound for 2 tours, and some habits don't die easily. However, she has more or less concluded at this point that Keltham's staff are not the kind of people she can work with. Except possibly impressing Redoul enough, he'll let her copy all his Fifth Circle spells. Mostly, she is focused on getting this contract agreed to with Keltham, so she can be briefed on the plan and get to work preventing it being a catastrophe.
They'll work it out in time.
Great. Pleasure doing business with you.
Does she want like a 10-minute break maybe, before he dumps the real story on her?
I'm sure I haven't given you an overwhelmingly encouraging impression of my emotional resilience. But if you don't statue me, stroke my hair, or announce you're maledicting my family to Abaddon, I actually don't have feelings I can't conceal perfectly.
I have entirely failed to understand what that had to do with anything whatsoever, but it sounded like you wanted me to go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
All right. I don't expect you're going to like this no matter how I frame it, but I'm going to try framing it anyways. First, on my model of reality, the souls who get consumed in Abaddon end up somewhere else, and we will eventually debate how nice or terrible that place probably is, and the souls in Hell and the Abyss and possibly the Maelstrom are more of a problem. On your view, the problem is the souls from awaiting consumption, being raised like cattle and being consumed in Abaddon, and those mortals who sort neutral evil and are terrified enough of Hell and the Abyss that they choose Abaddon, which, on the best statistics I've been able to find for Golarion, is around 5% of the non-boneyard baby population. I haven't yet been able to find out whether 15% of boneyard babies are choosing Abaddon, for example, which would bring the Golarions' real average up to 10% of all souls born being destroyed there. I hadn't put a priority on knowing before now because it didn't matter much to me. You are able to command my resources if you want to find out from Sarenrae's church what the actual figure is. I don't know what the statistics are for the larger multiverse, but it would not surprise me if, Pharasma being Pharasma, it's around 1/9 sorted to Abaddon, and then maybe half of those not going to Hell or the Abyss. Your stance that you would only accept a very tiny risk of destroying the multiverse in order to save souls in Hell may perhaps be valid given your view of things. That you should not, in general, accept a tiny risk of destroying the multiverse in order to fix it does not strike me as equally valid. You want to minimize that risk, but you should in fact be willing to go to some extreme lengths to fix Abaddon.
Agree. Fixing Abaddon seems like it should not in fact involve incurring much particular risk of the destruction of the multiverse. I expect that with unlimited wishes and 20 years as Golarion counts them, I could, in fact, just conquer it. And Hell wouldn't object, and Good wouldn't object, and even Pharasma wouldn't object because she hates Abaddon too.
I'm not sure how you do that exactly, but whatever it is, I expect it works only if you're the only one with unlimited wish diamonds, which, once the scientific revolution gets going, is maybe not going to be true a single year from now, let alone 20 years. Also, unlimited wish diamonds is not at all the same thing as unlimited wishes, especially right away, because you need casters for them. The City of Brass will start to notice if Golarion begins buying thousands of wishes per day from Ifriti. What I expect, mostly, is that the gods notice and shut it down. Unlimited diamonds is a disruption to a status quo that the gods don't ultimately object to. It would never have been allowed to happen in the first place if prophecy were not broken here.
That sounds about right, but they do let important changes to the world happen once in a while, and I just have to get a bat on in before they shut it down. I do see why you'd be deeply unsatisfied with trying to build civilization in a world that works that way.
Callistria, Asmodeus, Sarenrae, Dahak, Aristil, Gazre, Abadar, Desna, etc. All of those gods, I think it is my over 50% probability estimate, either have the power to release Rovagug if Pharasma's creation starts to have less value to them than nothingness, or have executed a logically binding compact with Pharasma, such that Pharasma's creation, from their standpoint, is never allowed to fall below the utility of nothingness. To at least those gods, the world will always fundamentally look, in a certain sense, okay. Not as good as it could possibly be, maybe, but okay. Noticeably better than okay. They would not be receiving a fair share of the gains from sealing Rovagug, or keeping it sealed, if reality to them was barely better than nothingness. I doubt that Sarenrae particularly likes that hell exists, but while Nirvana exists and is full of redemption and healing, Sarenrae, who is goddess of those domains, thinks that on the whole, the multiverse contains a whole lot of the stuff that she likes. No guarantee like that exists for mortals, for slaves sold in Absalom, for miserable people who wish they could suicide to Axis, but know they'd go to hell, for people who suicide out of misery and end up in hell or the abyss, the millions of mortals raised like cattle in awaiting consumption and consumed in Abaddon. They don't get a seat at the gods' negotiating table. Why should they? They have no power. They are not dangerous. Why should the gods concede anything to them? They can do as they want with mortals, and the mortals just have to take it.
Lots of the gods are ascended mortals.
None of the important ones. None of the ones who get to say, sorry, the world doesn't get to be like that. Abadar and Asmodeus are, I get the impression, spread across all of the planets and all of the material planes. Iomedae is just here, and maybe a dozen or so other planets. Asmodeus is allowed to export huge numbers of textbooks into Cheliax and buy souls by the hundreds. The older gods are allowed to intervene substantially more per planet than all of the younger gods on that planet, or at least that's how it seems to be in Galarian. I would guess that's because the older gods set the intervention budgets and see little reason to give the younger gods more than scraps. There's also the incredibly suspicious fact that nobody else seems to have managed to do exactly what Aurori did, despite an awful lot of Aurorians trying, with a greater knowledge base developed over time about how to advance along that pathway and much better institutional support than Aurori had. I mean, I say it's suspicious, but in fact the very obvious and essentially known explanation is a Chekek, which I flag as maybe hiding other traps, but still, there's an obvious explanation if you take the obviousness at face value.
Nethys is powerful. Orodin was powerful. Iomedae does all right for herself, I think, for as new as she is. Caden Kalian apparently is powerful enough for whatever his current batshit plan is, and he's pouring more effort into that than I've ever witnessed or heard of Asmodeus spending on anything.
Nethys is suspected, and not just by me, of being a special case. Orodin seems to have somehow ended up dead, you'll note, and neither Caden Kalian nor any other ascended mortal have ever done anything like what seems to be happening now, as best as my full-time historical researcher can determine. I suspect that Caden Kalian, and possibly also Nethys, are putting themselves into a position where, if I don't pull this off, they are caught and executed by the ancient gods for intervening beyond their allowed budget.
Seems like maybe they should put all that effort behind someone who doesn't want to unleash Rovagug, Carissa refrains from saying.
If you wish to support this AI reading and others like it, please visit patreon.com/AskWhoCastsAI. Any help is appreciated. And thank you to executive producer John Doe 7776059.